Hello there, I'm Rex, and I'm here with the Paper Prototypes podcast, and today I'm here with Renee, who developed Dome Keeper. So, Renee, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into game development?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, of course I can tell a little bit. I'm a guy from Germany, and I'm 35 years old, and I started doing creating games a little more than 20 years ago when I was a kid still. And I always loved games, played games since I could think on the Nintendo Entertainment System and PC and later PlayStation. Um, and I was always like that was always fascinating to me. And eventually, I learned about the fact that you can actually program and make games yourself, and that's when I started to yeah, get really hooked on this and try to learn it, which was really tough because I also didn't know anyone who could even program. Um, yeah, and then then I've been doing it for 20 years, and then I made one successful game.
So, it's taken you some time to get where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Although um, I also had breaks in there. Like I later went to the university to study IT, and during that time I also did work very little on games for a few years. Uh, Only at the end of it, I really picked it up again, and then I think we got really serious about it 6 years ago when we started doing game jams. And when I say we, I'm speaking about my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, uh, which I kind of roped into this whole thing about 10 years ago when I needed someone to make pixel art for my games because I really can't draw anything.
I can relate to that. So, Renee, why don't you describe Dome Keeper for the audience if there's anyone not aware of it?
Yeah, it's a roguelike mining defense action game. It's pretty arcadey, retro, pixel art, lower resolution, not an, a very big amount of colors. So kind of simple in the visuals, but polished. And you land on a planet with your dome, and then you go into the ground, mine for resources and treasures, bring them up to your dome, invest those resources into upgrades to help you mine even better and more, but also into weapon defense systems to protect you from these monsters, which arrive in waves every 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah, and then you do that over and over again until you are satisfied and leave the planet or find the relic you were looking for. So it's a relatively simple game in the whole construct, and you do a run. You go on runs, and they should take like 30 minutes to 2 hours. Although I know that our prestige players who play for the highest score, like early maxing out the run, they can play for many hours, like 5, 6, 7 hours on a run. That I didn't think was possible, but it seems it is.
And how did you come up with the initial loop for Dome Keeper? Was it initially started in a game jam, or
Yeah, so we made it in Ludum Dare 48, I think. Yeah, 40. It should be 48. Where the theme was deeper and deeper. And this time around, we wanted to make a very simple, straightforward game, not trying to be clever or innovative, and just make something simple and then try to polish it. We alternated sometimes between something more experimental, something more simple. Yeah, and that time around, we wanted to make our lives a little bit easier and get a little bit more positive feedback because experimental stuff is not universally liked, I would think. Um, yeah, and for a mining game, for me, it was always clear that I don't want mining for the sake of mining. A lot of games do this, like you mine so you can mine more, or survival games where you survive so that you can survive and survive more and build a house. So, but you don't really have a goal or a purpose why you would do this. Um, and I always wanted to have this purpose, and that quickly emerged in the form of monsters. And then you can have this um, the sort of pacing where you alternate between these two different states of mining and fighting. And that's just something that feels kind of natural. That the whole game, I would say, from the game jam, emerged very naturally. Like there was not a big eureka moment, but it was to me it felt like it was a pretty straightforward design. Like if you want to have mining but want a purpose and don't want just mining for the mining sake, you want a sink for the resources, then some form of combat that's cyclical is kind of a natural conclusion to that, at least for me.
And speaking of pacing, how did you deal with planning pacing? Like, how did you come up with, what should be the time between the waves of monsters and mining?
Oh, I can't even really recall. I think I just set it to a minute, like a minute of mining. Played it. It felt quite right, and then I left it at that. So it and then even now it's still a minute. It starts with a minute, and that's some like really strange thing about game dev. Why we have the numbers we have? Why is it 60 seconds and not 54 seconds or 111 seconds? Like maybe that would be way more fun, but we always go for like these nicer numbers. Yeah, and the only thing that really needed changing was that the more you progress in the game, the deeper you go in the mine, the shorter these 60 seconds feel, because you have some travel time. So that suddenly you cannot mine 60 seconds anymore, but maybe only 30 seconds, because the rest of the time you have to go up and down. And that didn't feel good. So what I did was the time gradually increases depending on how big the portion is of the map that you already dug out. And that's a very gradual transition that people don't even really feel, even if they later end up having 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes of time between the waves. They don't feel like it got longer. It just feels right. Like it's always a similar pace, I think.
And did you have any problem with players finding like degenerate strategies or ways that they just kind of found things that were really overpowered that you had to like plan around or counteract?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Tomb Keeper we have two modes. We have Relic Hunt, where you just try to find this relic in the ground and retrieve it. And there I'm not very concerned about people finding strong strategies. But we also have this other mode, Prestige, where people compete on a leaderboard. And that I thought that was a kind of easy mode to add, but the implications from that are huge, because suddenly you have to have a really tight balance between the elements. The elements have to be comparatively on the same level. Yeah, and there it does matter a lot if you have any things that could be considered exploits or dominant strategies. And we had quite a lot of these, I think. And I always I did what I could, like listen to the community, analyze the problem, see how I can improve it, and always either rebalanced the game or completely reworked the mechanics. Like until now, there have been so many iterations on the mechanics and balance and upgrades. It feels like we had like 3 different games since maybe the initial demo 1.5 years ago. So I still work a lot on the already existing content and tune it and improve it.
What were some of the biggest things you learned from the demo? Because I remember when I was watching Skill Up and like the big game he was talking about was Dome Keeper.
Ooh, yeah, that's that's already like quite long ago. No, uh, yeah, it's been 1.5 years since the demo released. The like the initial demo we released was for Dome Romantic, so that was the name of the Game Jam game. But we planned earlier to rename it to Dome Keeper. But we still released the old demo of the kind of old style game before the graphics rework we did. Uh, and the main thing I think that changed with that was we learned that the game is popular and that people like to play it, and that the game will be a success. So that was a big relief, and it wasn't learning on the mechanical side, but just knowing that we are on the right track. That from the feedback we got until this point, that feedback is representative of a general audience, and that we're doing, I think, many things in the right way, like making a game that you can very easily get into. That's very accessible, and that's something I specifically do for game jams, like make the barrier of entry as low as possible, because game jam players have no patience, or little patience usually, and they also don't read something. At least a considerable fraction of people will not read anything. So I try to make the game in a way that you don't need to read anything, and you don't need to have a lot of patience, but immediately get thrown into the game and are given or put into the situation where you can learn about the game in a natural way without the tutorial telling you now go left and now press this button and something like that.
What tricks did you use to be able to help the player, I guess, ease into the game? Like, I noticed that sometimes when ore was in a diagonal, I could notice like um,
Yeah,
chips of it, which helped me mine faster, or well, be able to find the ore. Are there any other tricks that you use to be able to help players?
it's funny that you point this out because that was actually a bug. So the small peak of resource that disappeared is purely a bug and was not part of the Dome Romantic demo before the graphics rework. But in the graphics rework, I programmed the shader in a way, and it suddenly you could see this little edge. But people liked it, and I can see why, and it's kind of nice. So I left it in. So it's a bug that became a feature. Um, Other
How
than that, there are a lot of small things. Uh, like I've seen so many people play, and not one person struggled, didn't or needed to be told how to move, what the player character is, and where the player character should go. Every single player I watched, and that's really a broad range of players, from 5-year-old kids to 60-year-old older people. Um, Everyone figured that out, and that's because of if you look very closely, because of the like placement and visual cues that you see initially. So the keeper is a little left off center in an area where there's not much stuff around, and it's the only thing that really moves in the dome. So it's an immediate visual attention. Then you don't need to tell people that you move with a WASD gamepad control sticks or arrow keys. They will try that. And they try that and they understand, okay, I'm moving this character. And then if you look at the dome, you got this circle that clearly goes into the ground. So that's another like intentional color choice there to put focus on this hole in the dome floor. And what you can also, oh, my computer, can you still hear me? Yeah,
Yeah, I can still see
that's
you.
all. Yeah, just my monitors were turning off because I didn't move the mouse for some time. And then the camera is positioned in a way that you can just see a little bit of the mine below. So you already got that in the view. And that whole scene is kind of carefully constructed to guide the players to learn the movement and to move into the mine. And then you move into the mine naturally, and you will bump into a rock because you are moving downwards, and there's a rock downwards, and that's already how you mine. So you bump into it, you don't need to press anything else, and as soon as you bump into them, you see cracks appearing, and you understand, okay, I'm destroying tiles by just moving into them. And then the second tile you destroy is always a resource tile. So, and that's when you learn about the resources. And like that, with a lot of small things, the whole sequence is kind of constructed so you can ease into this world with as little friction as possible, and with the game telling you as little as possible explicitly, just trying to present itself so you can uncover it. And that's really something I enjoy and value in games. If the game isn't on the nose with how it works, but lets you discover it.
And how did you learn all those techniques? Is that just stuff you picked up over the years of doing game jams, or was it like a textbook you read?
No, not a textbook, definitely not. Game jams were really. I feel like game jams were key to learning this, but then it's also important how much you reflect on the game you made in a game jam, how much you learn from it. You can make 20 game jam games and not learn a lot from it, or you make 5 and learn a lot from it. So I think both is possible. And then it's also a lot of I listen to a lot of talks and podcasts and interviews just with designers from games where I really like the design. That's people like Jonathan Blow, Lucas Pope, to some degree also Edmund Macmillan. He spoke a lot about the joy of discovery in the old Zelda games, for example, where you were able to discover things on your own without the game telling you, and you had a sense of wonder about the world. So that was absolutely an important bit. Then just seeing how people and players struggle with my early games, just trying to understand the concept, trying to see, like, it's if you see someone playing your game for the first time, you will learn a ton about your game, because you have all this previous knowledge about your game that you can never kind of emulate a first time user experience. So seeing someone kind of misuse and not understand the concepts makes you think ideally how you can present them in a way that helps them, that is good in teaching them. So it's just a lot of thought, listening to smarter people, but also having. I mean, as I said, I've been playing games for 30 years now, and I've played. I'm not sure if there's even a single genre of games that I didn't play. I'm a very broad player, and I think just from that, I'm learning a lot. And then you listen and think about game design, and then you also start to consume games in a slightly different way, where you see all these neat little design things where you can learn from. So I think that's a good school of game design.
How did you come up with Drillbert? I think that's the cutest little thing that's in the game and seems to be a community favorite.
Yeah, that's actually a story I like to tell, because it showed to me once again that a certain diversity in a team is really valuable. And I don't mean, I'm not sure why, but people, from my point of view, often equate diversity on very superficial terms. Like, if we look different, we are diverse, or something like that. But that's not for me diversity, because we might look different, but if we think the same, we are not a diverse team. So, and for me, it's about diversity of emotions and preferences and such. And then each team member can bring in a different point of view. And this was exactly what happened with Drillbot. Because I, as a more methodical machine mathematic person, um, I wanted to make a drill bot, a robot that drills. And in the code, the thing is also called drill bot. And I thought you would bring some fuel to it to refuel it, and it would drill into the rock. But my wife Anne thought it would be much more likable. She had the idea of making this an animal, because animals are cute and likable and much more interesting than a block with a drill in front that raw designs. One based on a how is it called? Not a mole rat, but a certain black small animal that digs into a mole, I think.
Yeah, I think that's him.
Yeah, yeah, a mole. And she also made a little dinosaur because our daughter was really into dinosaurs at that point. And she still is, but she also was back then. And that really stuck. And then to me, it was immediately obvious that this is the vastly superior choice in how we can present this. And it's also something I think I find very important when working with people. I don't tell them what they should make. I tell them what I want to have from a mechanical point of view. Like, I want a thing that digs sideways and that I can bring something like fuel to so it works faster or it doesn't stop working. How they design it is open, so they can bring in their creativity to this. And that's something I found really valuable because yeah, that's just kind of leveraging all the brain power you have in the team and all the creativity. And yeah, that's how Drillbot got made. And if I would have 4 Renes in Bip and Bits and nothing else, we would have a unlikable robot today, and not this and not this cool character, of which we also made some plushies that are like well in demand. We are not selling them, but people are really hot for them. And yeah, as you say, Drillbot is absolutely a community darling.
So, oftentimes when I was exploring, I would notice that there would be, I could almost see into the distance like deeper caves where there was more ancient technology, or there would be like a red eye that would follow me around. What's like your internal lore for the planet that the player is exploring?
Yeah, that's yeah. I do have a kind of a lore document, um, where I outlined the kind of history of the universe, like how did we move from 2022 to this kind of future scenario of mankind, because that's it. And it's that there are no aliens in Dawnkeeper, and you are visiting various planets that were once settled by humans. Um, that's I would guess that's as much as I can share. But in general, I would say the world building and lore follows follows the mechanics, because I know what I need from the game, and then we can think about, okay, how could this have happened in this world? How could we visualize it, or what's the explanation for it to be this kind of thing? So lore follows usually mechanics. And right now there's like nearly everything is implicit. So you can just observe the world and try to make some thoughts about the world. And we might get a other game mode in the future that actually makes some more explicit lore bits into the game. But a lot of it's also not fully decided. So I have an outline. I know there was for example a big event happening, but I have 3 different versions of that event. That and eventually I have to decide on which it is. So and until we are ready to share this with a new game mode, maybe I'll keep my options open.
So, at the intro of the game, the dome comes down and crushes some creatures, and it seems that,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to say I'm the invader, but I'm building a dome on their land. So, who would you position as the villain in Dome Keeper?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting bit that also got discussed, I think, a lot in the community. If we are actually the bad guys, because we are landing on a kind of foreign planet, we are stripping it of its natural resources, killing the inhabitants, and then then moving away again or something like that. So that doesn't sound like a nice thing to do, right? Um, but I also like to not have too many cliches in some way. So from my point of view, there is absolutely no villain in the story. There are just people or creatures with different desires, and they might clash. And you 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 can think the monsters are, so we call them monsters, but who knows, right? Uh, you can think of them as being innocent, but maybe they are not. And with the keeper, it's the same thing. Maybe the keeper is not there for personal gain, but has a higher mission to do something positive, or is a corporate slave who has little choice. So you don't know about all this stuff. So it's intentional to some degree, so people can put their own version of how they want to see it. Um, and until we until we open up a little bit with the lore, I do like it like that. So I wouldn't say there's a villain.
Um, Oftentimes, sometimes I don't have the strength to carry all the ore because I'm too busy digging up everything.
Mhm.
And when I come back down, there's like these little spiders crawling on the ore. Was there any reason you decided to add those?
Yeah, I guess I guess they came in a similar time when we added these monster that you crush in the beginning, and the monster crushing in the beginning, just because I didn't mention that before, that was what I wanted to have as our version of the Simpsons couch cake. Like each time you start the game, you have another like small visual joke with the monsters. But people really took that seriously. Like, of course, yeah, of course, the monsters are enraged because we just crushed their friend Jeremy or something like that. Um, yeah, and the creatures in the mine, that's just cosmetics, if you will. It's just something to give a little bit more life to the mine. So you don't only have dead rock in there. And I do hope, I mean, it was one first step, and same as plants, by the way. So plants are also something that's purely cosmetic in the mine, but I think it's also an important bit just to give a little bit of more character to the different biomes you see in the mine. And it's also kind of funny because, especially with the ants you mentioned, people get scared that they might eat their resources. That's I do like that.
That's what I initially thought, but then my other thought was, oh, maybe they're there to let me know that I forgot some ore because they're moving, and that like visually lets me know that there's something happening. So that was part of a guess maybe I had made, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a good guess. And again, I kind of like it if people can bring up their own explanations for things, because it's just something like that engages players in a way. At least the players who like, they can put a little thought into that, and that's neat.
so how did you come up with the color palette for each map? Because Dome Keeper has such a unique, I'm not sure what the word is, well, other than color palette.
Yeah, I didn't. So that's all Anna's work. And so in the game, like color palettes are really difficult, I think. And for the longest time, we also struggled with this. And then we started, or yeah, Dome Keeper was actually the first game where we used a pre-made color palette, or Dome Romantic, I should say. That was the color palette that a lot of games are using. It's called SLSO8, and it has these 8 colors that are really nice, and a lot of games use them in very different ways. And I think Anne found a very strong way of using them, with putting these orange highlights into the game. And but she also learned a lot then, and took some courses and practiced, and then she got into a good spot where she was able to create new palettes that she liked, with the style with the pixel art style we already had established for Dome. And yeah, then she just kept making more palettes and palettes, and they turned out really nice. But it's not just the colors. Like, the colors are maybe half of it, but the other half is how you use them, how your sprites use the color. And I think Anne did created a very cool style with that. That's kind of reduced, where the strongest colors are only used sparsely on highlights or outline, not really outlines, but like lit lines around some corners, something like that.
Were there any other visual tricks that you used to help create an atmosphere for the game?
Visual tricks. Generally, yes. There's a lot of stuff going on until things feel right and juicy. So if you hit the rock, for example, there's a lot of things going on, like small sparks that come out, but also a little bit of rock debris. And then you have your jetpack that does this little particle effect, and you have this little light effect around the keeper. And these are all things that just add up. It's not complicated stuff usually, just small visual feedback or improvement or juice things. But yeah, you just kind of take it all together, and then it gives you a good feel.
So, something I thought of was that I imagine would be really hard to balance. How do you figure out how much ore you want to put in a map, like for each size? Like, what are you like, so that way everyone's not either drowning in too much iron or not enough water?
Yeah. So there are a few layers to this. You could think of a base size map, and then it nearly doesn't matter how many resources you put in. But I generated it in such a way that you don't stumble into resource over resource, but you can actually also dig through some areas without constantly finding resources, because that opens up the game to some mining strategy and to gadgets that help you find or locate resources. So that's one part. And then you have a set amount of resources, kind of a resource pacing maybe. And then it's about balancing the updates to cost the right amount, so you have a smooth progression over time. And that's just something of playing your own game over and over and over again, figuring out. I mean, you have to have a good feel of what feels right, and then it has been a key thing for us for the past 2 years to have playtests and to speak with the community and to constantly get feedback from them, think about the feedback, incorporate the feedback. I mean, that's kind of my job to do. A lot of things also kind of naturally emerge. You could always do things differently, but for example, one block of iron gives you 1 to 3 iron like resources, and that's just an amount that works well with how large the tunnels are. So if the iron resources were smaller, you could maybe do 4 instead of 2 on a median or on an average. But so there are a lot of ways you could do that, and then just every upgrade would cost double the iron that it does now. So there's no like perfect answer how to do it. It's just something that has to be felt and play tested.
So the game came out a year ago, or well, the demo on Next Fest came out a year ago, and then I guess before that you had the Ludum Dare version. You're still putting out updates, and it seems that playtesting is very important. How have you not gotten sick of your game over how much you must be testing for it by playing it yourself?
Yeah, it's strange, and it's also it's a really good sign, and not something I've felt too often. Like usually, if you make a game, you eventually cannot enjoy playing it anymore. But just this week, I kind of got hooked on Prestige, and I played maybe 15 hours of Prestige just for fun this week, and I don't get to play that much anymore, so so and I still had great fun, even despite having spent maybe 1,000 hours in Domekeeper already. So that's a good sign. I don't know. It's just I guess it's the same thing of why it works for so many people. That it's the right mix of being stupid and being something that where you can employ some strategy. Like you can like what I really like is, for example, a game that I can play while also listening to a podcast or watching a video on a second screen. And that's something Domekeeper is perfectly suited for. You don't need to read stuff, you don't need to listen to too much stuff. Um, so and then the whole mining and fighting is just something you can mindlessly do, but you can also take a minute to think about the strategy you want to employ, or to be smart, and also the second to second interactions. For me, they give a feeling of I can be skilled in those, like in the battle, of course, but even in mining. If I'm making really efficient moves in mining, it does feel nice. So it's kind of, for me, it's it's an evergreen, and I know it's similar for many people. It's magic.
I imagine part of that comes from the game feel where you were talking about getting feedback when mining, but you also have stuff like there's a little jingle that plays when you find like a little upgrade relic, or the noises just when you pick up the ore themselves. Are there any like tricks that you've picked up that maybe we haven't talked about that really contribute over to like the game feel while playing Domekeeper?
Hmm. That's a good question. Okay, I I don't think there are really tricks in game feel. Like yeah, as you said, like one key thing, we have a great sound designer, of course. So that does add a lot, and makes the game just feel so much nicer. And then what you cannot make compromises on are the controls, how the character moves. That stuff has to feel really good. Like generally, we make content and graphics and whatever, and we go for an 80% rule. Like if we are 80% happy with it, it's enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be great usually, because people will not care about if the particle effect is amazing or just good. So that doesn't make a big difference. But the controls have to be really tight. So that's a key thing. Um, Game feel wise, I'm not even sure if there's it's Dome is not extremely juicy. I guess what you want to have is you want to have for every interaction or action your player does, you want to have feedback on multiple levels. You want a visual feedback and you want an acoustic feedback. So when you bump into a rock, you should really see that it's happening, and you should really hear that it's happening. And if you have a laser that shoots at monsters, you should really hear when you start shooting. And if you hit a monster, the sound has to change, or an additional sound has to come in that you can already hear that you are hitting something. And not only should you hear it, but you should also have, for example, a new particle effect at the monster that shows that you are hitting it. And ideally, you also have the monster reacting in some way to being hit. So a lot of it is about just providing visual and audio feedback to everything the player does.
What are your personal favorite games that nail game feel?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, Game feel. Can you help me out? What comes to mind? What comes to your mind if you think about good game feel?
This is going to
What
be a
would you?
very odd one, but I'm going to say Stardew Valley because
Mhm.
the gameplay's really simple. Like, you just gotta cut a tree down, but like that could be the most boring thing in the world. But you hear like the splintering of the wood as the tree comes down. When it crashes, you hear it break apart, and then there's just the very satisfying like blip when you pick up the wood, but there's lots of chunks, so you get the satisfying of hearing them all go into your inventory. And there's a lot of sound design that goes into just cutting down a tree that makes what
Mm.
essentially should be very boring gameplay, which is just clearing farmland, actually very addictive.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I'm not a Stardew Valley player, but maybe I got something similar. The Kingdom games, also published by Raw Fury. They've been also inspirational for me as a game designer, and I think they nail the game feel, but in a little bit of an unconventional way. So it's a little bit more about atmosphere and ambience, a little bit more than being super juicy. Uh, but what you do there, all the actions feel really nice, and the kind of neat thing about that is that it's not this over the top. You shoot a million bullets and everything explodes, and you have a ton of screen shake, and that's suddenly the best thing apparently. But it's kind of a reduced palette of effects, which gives so much more room to each individual thing that's happening. So if you drop a coin, you can hear a single coin drop, and that's not something that might be true for every game.
What was how did you decide what you wanted the because when you get the final relic, there's like this ripple effect that like emanates from the final relic. How did you think about what you wanted to do to make that final relic feel powerful?
The relic. So you mean powerful during that time where you bring the relic up?
Yes, that the I
Yeah.
forget what the I guess that one would be the artifact, and then the prior ones are the relics.
No, no. Yeah. So the naming is a little bit confusing. I'm always thinking about, okay, should we rename the stuff? But like we have the gadgets and the primary gadgets, and I think, okay, that they should not be called primary gadgets. They should have a different name. Uh, Sorry, I just scrolled through my Steam library, and another game where I thought the game feel was good is, for example, Mini Motorways or Mini Metro. Um,
Oh, I've
and
played mini Metro before.
yeah, uh, and it's in the same way. It's not this. If you go on YouTube and search for games with good game feel, you usually find these shooters that have to maximize every aspect, Broforce or something like that, which has a great game feel, and but it's into one extreme. And Mini Metro is taking the other route of reducing but being very satisfying still. Okay, now back to your actual question. Um, yeah, we did quite a few things. So for one, you don't just stumble upon the relic and then you can take it. Instead, you have to find these switches that you first have to open or activate. And if you found them all, they connect with a cable to the relic chamber. The relic chamber opens up with a big fanfare. So it takes like, I don't know, 8 seconds for it to open up, and a stinger sound clip comes in, and the doors, like you have this quadruple door, and each door segment opens individually and is accompanied by a good sound, like each door does this chunk, chunk, chunk thing. So that's a bit of fanfare, and then you see this relic inside, and it's it's animated, it seems to have energy, and then you take it out, and suddenly all the energy vanishes from the chamber. And then, as you said, you have this ripple effect, so it seems nearly alive in a way. And you get this music sets in. So the usual music stops, and one new track sets in, but it's reduced. It's kind of calm. And the closer you go with the relic to the dome, the more does a second layer to this track fade in. That brings in kind of a bright melody. So that's kind of the music design for retrieving the relic. So even just bringing the relic up is a little bit of a journey, and you have this progression in the sound. And then if you bring it to the dome, it settles into the dome with a big sound and really activates the whole cellar of the dome, and then the cellar is kind of strumming with energy. So yeah, we make this big fanfare around this because that's something that should really feel impactful if it's kind of the conclusion of your run.
I don't think there's anything else in the game that has that ripple effect. So the first time I
Yeah.
saw like the main relic have that, I was thinking like, wow, this thing is so powerful. It's like almost breaking the art style of the game. Like it's got like this otherworldly feel to it, and I really liked that. Like it really made me feel like I was picking up a powerful artifact, even more than it shoots up a giant skull and kills everything in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it.
So, what was your thought process behind coming up with all the domes? Because some of them are, really varied. You'll have like the laser dome and the artillery dome, which, I'm not going to say they're not creative, but I think I could have come up with that kind of stuff. But then there's a Tesla dome, which is where you just come up with a circle of electricity. And there's the sword dome, which I never would have guessed to make.
Um, yeah, there are a few different ways to approach it. So, for one, you can think about thematic settings, like what would a dome look like that um, has no direct weapon but has a sort of drone swarm. How would that dome work? So you can go by that, or you could think about the different way, like how would a dome play like, where you have a aim reticle that you can move across the screen to shoot at things. And with the Tesla dome, for example, I approached it from this direction. And there it really is about what things can you do in that setup. And you could implement this and design it in a few different ways. And we iterated a lot on it and also tested some different ideas. But eventually, I think just in a kind of feedback session within Bip and Bits, we talked about it, and it didn't quite feel right yet. But that's always perfectly fine. Like every element does not feel right until it does. So that's no problem. But then it's only about, okay, what can we do? What's lacking? What could be improved? And one bit was that that led me to this idea of the shot could leave something behind, and that was the electro orb. And then from playtesting, for me it was clear that this is actually the most fun part about this. Not aiming at stuff and shooting it, but placing this kind of area of effect that stays there, so you can think about what areas you want to cover, which way. So it's every dome is always a long iteration, and some domes are more straightforward. Like the artillery dome, I maybe had 4 iterations or 5 or something like that, where I design something and do a playtest, maybe let other people playtest and then change it up. And Tesla Dome maybe had 20, so that was much more complicated to make. But in general, the key thing for me is how can we set up the mechanics in a way that playing this dome does feel very different to all the other domes? That suddenly you think about the monsters, their way of approaching you, and the battle in a different way. And the laser and sword dome are a good example for that. Because I could have, instead of using a laser, I could have had a machine gun up there that needs to reload or something like that. But that would essentially still be laser gameplay because you would move it left or right and you would shoot, and it would have a little bit of a different flavor because you need to stop from time to time to reload. But it's still, you would think about the monsters in battle in exactly the same way as you do with the laser. With the sword dome, on the other hand, sword dome does play very differently, and we had a blog post about that on Steam. It was a long time ago, and one example I made there was with the laser. It's really bad if monsters keep coming from left and then from the right and from the left and from the right, because you always have to rotate and you lose time, and yeah, that's kind of a weakness of the laser dome. The sword dome, on the other hand, if the monsters come left, right, that's perfect, because you swing to one side, picking up speed, slicing the monster, and then you swing to the other side. And if they all came from the left side only, you would effectively put out half the damage per second. So they are not only mechanically different, but you really need to think about the battles in a different way.
So, what's next for Dome Keeper? I know we touched a little bit on a new game mode, but is there anything else you want to share potentially as a sneak peek exclusive for the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So for October, I took except for playing Prestige mode and supporting the last update, I took a break from Dome Keeper. We tried to prototype for a different game, but there will still be a lot of Dome Keeper things coming. The next thing I would like to release is the actual peaceful mode, where you move to a new planet, you terraform the planet, make it nice, and settle this planet with settlers, like colonizing the planet. That mode would have no monsters, so it's a peaceful mode, and that's something a lot of people have been asking for since the early days, which I never expected. Like, I thought if we don't have the battle, as I said initially, we would mine for mining's sake, and that's nonsense. That's boring. No one likes that. But it turns out there are a lot of people who would love to only mine, just to relax. So they don't want to do anything else. And that's also something I learned, I think, during the development of Dome Keeper, is just to appreciate how different the people are and how they like different things. And yeah, that we can serve different people in different ways. And that, yeah, I think just respecting all the different opinions and needs of the players and trying to unify that into one game that can make a lot of people happy. And yeah, one more thing. Or do you want to?
No,
sorry.
it's okay. You can keep going.
Would you want to say something to this thought? Because I had another one.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say,
thing.
funnily
Yeah,
enough, there
sorry.
were a lot of moments I was playing where I'm like, oh man, I could really use a peaceful mode after all this anxiety-inducing stuff.
Yeah. And we added one such thing to Prestige. It's called Miner mode, but it's not really the peaceful mode. It's not really Zen, because you still try to be as fast as you can because you want to go up high on the leaderboard. And I really want to provide that super peaceful mode that, for example, also smaller kids can play, because combat is difficult, and like our daughter, when she was 3 years old, and also now that she's 4, she can play Dome Keeper just fine. But she's even using the probe, for example, to scan for resources. But she wants to play without monsters. I always use the kind of dev console to disable monsters. And she has fun in Dome Keeper, but she doesn't want to play with monsters. So that kind of opens it up to it's also a little bit motivated by her. And it opens it up to smaller kids, and I hope it works for other kids too. And the yeah, the other the update after that, or one thing we are already starting to work on, what I really want to push for, is we now added a lot of things into the loadout that you can play with, and we added new gadgets in the past, but I want to really push how varied a run can be. Just having more gadgets, more caves, more synergies. With the last update with Double Dome, I added these Dome supplements, where you can find something during the run that adds new upgrades into an existing tech tree. And the supplement mechanic could also exist for weapons and gadgets. And ideally, the gadgets would also have even a larger impact on the run. So they could be a little bit or much stronger, but maybe not as many, and maybe a little bit different in resource cost, so that a different set of gadgets will really shape how your run feels, and you can have very, very different runs depending on what stuff you find and decide for. So it's kind of a replayability update.
Well, it's been great having you on the podcast so far, Renee. Is there anything you want to shout out? Any links of yours that you want people to follow you on, or a local pizza place?
Yeah, no, if you like to play Dome Keeper and want to talk about Dome Keeper, come to our Discord. There's a lovely community of friendly people talking about it. Yeah, other than that, I I don't have too much going on. If you wanna, like, maybe if you are a game dev, you can check out our itch.io page, pippinbits.itch.io, and there you can see a progression of Game Jam games, like the first Game Jam game we made and how it evolved over time. And I would hope maybe that's a showcase for. It doesn't matter how your first game looks. If you keep learning through game jams, you can keep making better and better games. So I can advise participating in game jams.
All right, I think that's going to be all for this episode of the Paper Prototypes podcast. As always, you can see this video on YouTube, Spotify, or Podbean. Links in the description down below. And of course, I'm on X, Threads, and Blue Sky. God, I hope everyone migrates to just one of those eventually. And in the description will be my Linktree and Ko-Fi if you want to be able to donate and keep the podcast alive. As always, thanks for watching. Bye!
Bye bye.